So this study is on quercetin and influenza A. So again, we'll pull the slide up for you here. And you see here we found that quercetin inhibited influenza infection with a wide spectrum of strains. So this was not a study done on humans so much as it was done kind of in a lab measuring the effect of quercetin on different types of viral strains. So the study summarized as this: the study indicates that quercetin showing inhibitory activity in the early stage of influenza infection provides a future therapeutic option to develop effective, safe, and affordable natural products for the treatment and prophylaxis of IAV infection. IAV is influenza A virus. So again, this study showing quercetin's antiviral properties and effects. So one is showing you, let's go to the next slide. I'm just going to keep showing you some of the research because I want you to see how much research is actually being done on this natural agent. And I think, personally, along with the vitamin C, the IV vitamin C therapies that are starting to be looked at in China, I think they should be looking at quercetin as a major agent as well because of its properties. So this study here, you can see quercetin reduces susceptibility to influenza infection following stressful exercise. So this was actually a human study. Actually, no, this one was a mouse study. We have a human study that was done as well. You can see these data suggest that short-term quercetin feedings may prove to be an effective strategy to lessen the impact of stressful exercise on susceptibility to respiratory infection. And one of the things that intense exercise does is it can increase the risk for developing respiratory infection. So this brings me to another point or another tip tonight, which is those of you who maybe are thinking about doing hyper-aggressive exercise right now, you should just be aware that, you should be exercising, you should be moving, but a super aggressive exercise right now might not be the best thing to do, as it can increase your risk for developing an upper infection in the airways. So again, quercetin, by the way, and let's skip that one and go to, here we go. So here's another research study. There we go. On flavonoid-mediated inhibition of SARS coronavirus. So again, this was a study that there's a protein called a 3C-like protease, which in severe acute respiratory syndrome associated with coronavirus. Now, this is not COVID-19, but this is SARS-CoV. But this research study shows that quercetin and a number of other natural agents as well, epigallocatechin and gallate and gallocatechin gallate, which are some of the ingredients found in green teas, display good inhibition toward this particular protein, this 3C-like protease, which again, this protein plays a role in the development of acute respiratory issues associated with the SARS-CoV coronavirus. So again, this study is showing that quercetin and other natural agents actually have some good, we'll say, potential for blocking certain proteins that can make the disease worse. Again, these are not human trials. These are studies that are called kinetic studies. So they're actually just showing the potential property for this nutrient, or this not necessarily nutrient, but this plant-based ingredient quercetin or bioflavonoid quercetin to have potential as an antiviral medication. And then we go into the next study, which is COVID-19. Now, this is brand new. This, you can see on the date on this one. This was just published on March 13th. As a matter of fact, this study was done. It's a type of study. It's a docking study, so it's not actually a study done in humans, but it's kind of like, think of it like a computer algorithm where they're looking at, in this case, they were looking at something called COVID-19 main protease, which is one of the main proteins from this COVID-19, and they're trying to find agents, potential therapeutic agents that can interfere with this protein. And so quercetin was one of those that came up on the list in their model study. So again, a molecular docking study. It's not a study that's been performed on humans, but it's a study that's done to try to say, okay, what things could we use in humans? What things should we be trying in humans, so that we can research this further? That's what this type of study is illustrating. Again, it's too soon, and there are no research studies on quercetin in COVID-19, but what this study is showing is that quercetin has good affinity for binding the COVID-19 main protease, which could be a potential therapeutic benefit. Again, it needs to be further studied, but I wanted to show that to you because this is brand new. And then I've got one more slide for you because there's actually two more. So there we go. So this this following excerpt that I took, this was actually from a report, not from a research paper, but is a doctor and his group in Montreal are actually getting ready. They've just announced they're getting ready to study quercetin in a big way. So if we can go to that next slide, I want to just kind of read for you what Dr. Michael Cretin is doing. So this doc, he's a renowned scientist at the Clinical Research Institute of Montreal, along with his co-researcher, Congolese scientist Manjambu Mabike. Dr. Crichton is currently awaiting approval to send the drug derived from plants, and again, the drug is referred to in this case as quercetin, right, for clinical trials that will test it against the novel coronavirus. While this would be the first clinical study to test quercetin against COVID-19, natural health experts have long credited this natural plant pigment with the ability to deal with a variety of viruses. In fact, Dr. Cretin describes quercetin as a broad-spectrum antiviral that has been shown in studies to be effective against formidable diseases such as SARS, Ebola virus, and the Zika virus, and as well as some of the things I showed you earlier, rhinovirus and influenza. Now, incoming data from quercetin trial will be monitored minute by minute from Montreal in a series of interviews and articles. Dr. Cretin has released details of the imminent study. Once the team is granted approval to send the quercetin to China, samples will be delivered to the Chinese Academy of Sciences in Wuhan. Canadian and Chinese scientists will then collaborate on the trials, which will involve about 1,000 test patients. Dr. Cretin and Mabike will join colleagues from the nonprofit International Consortium of Antivirals, which Cretin helped to found in 2004 as a response to the SARS epidemic, and maintaining a round-the-clock communication center. From there, they will be able to monitor patients' progress in Wuhan, including viewing patients' charts and x-rays, according to Dr. Cretin. It may be possible to have results on quercetin's ability to treat COVID within 60 days of the beginning of the trial. So this is getting ready to happen, hopefully sooner rather than later. So we'll have this data that we can share with you guys as things evolve from this research study. So again, this is, the answer to so many of you that have called in or that have asked, what can we use? The vitamin C's on the store shelves are empty. Is there something we can do to support our immune system? Look, my opinion, and one of the things that I'm doing right now as my vitamin C's, even my personal ones are running low, is using quercetin. Now, again, I'm not saying that quercetin is going to prevent COVID-19. I'm not saying that it's going to treat your COVID-19. I'm just simply saying that it's very, very promising. A lot of research is showing the antiviral properties of quercetin. And so, if you're just trying to step out there and do something proactive, this is something, if you want to use it and you can't get your hands on vitamin C, go for it with quercetin. Now, I want to come back for a minute. What we were talking about with NSAIDs and what we were talking about with drugs like Tylenol or acetaminophen for fever reduction, because I promised you I would kind of talk about this. So both, we don't want to, like I said, we don't want to try to use something like quercetin and vitamin C to reduce an acute fever if the fever is becoming life-threatening. So if the fever is getting so high that it's not being controlled, we don't really want to try to use a natural agent to do that. We want to use something potentially a little bit stronger. Now, some people would say, don't use these things. Like the old saying is let it ride, like let the fever ride. And I've got a slide on that too, Mel, if we can get that one queued up too. But fever reduction can be done with Tylenol, but here's the problem with using Tylenol. I showed you earlier, the problem with NSAIDs is that NSAIDs, although there's some antiviral properties, but not as far as we know with COVID, NSAIDs can reduce your body's ability to make antibodies, and NSAIDs can also, have the potential to increase the receptor on the cell that allows COVID into your cell, to hijack your cell. Tylenol, on the other hand, will reduce the fever, but Tylenol leads to a depletion of a very important key nutrient called glutathione. Now, glutathione is one of the main antioxidants in your lungs that protects you from things like pneumonia and has very, very strong antioxidant properties to protect you from that inflammation. It's also what your liver uses to detoxify your body in a very big way. We did a whole show a couple of weeks ago on NAC. If you haven't watched that show, go back and watch it. NAC is responsible, it's one of the precursors to helping your body produce glutathione. And like I said, Tylenol inhibits glutathione. It depletes glutathione. That's kind of more of an accurate way to say it. It doesn't really inhibit it. It depletes it. It depletes it from the storage. And so if you're using, Tylenol or NSAIDs, you've got to weigh the risks of what they could potentially do versus the risk of that fever actually creating a major issue. And this is not something I can tell you to do or not to do. This is really something you need to be speaking with your doctor about if you're working with a doctor. But as a general rule of thumb, is that slide up, Mel? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if you're looking at this slide right now, so I pulled this from, again, from the medical research. It just says, should you take anything to lower your fever, suppress it or let it ride? What this is saying is there are two basic fields of thought. Fever should be suppressed because the metabolic costs outweigh the potential physiological benefit in an already stressed host, right? And so again, this is where you make the judgment call. But then the second field of thought is that fever is a protective, adaptive response that should be allowed to run its course under most circumstances. The latter approach, sometimes referred to as the let it ride philosophy, has been supported by several recent randomized controlled trials, and which are challenging earlier observational studies and may be pushing the pendulum away from the Pavlovian treatment response. Again, this study was published in 2015, basically stating that you may just want to let the fever go. Now, again, I think it's still a judgment call, and you've got to work with your doc to make that judgment call. Because if the fever's, like I said, if the fever's 104, 105 and burning you up, and it's just wasting you away, and you're not able to function, maybe time to look at a fever reducing agent. I think where people run into bigger problems with Tylenol blocking or inhibiting glutathione is consistent use, repetitive use over and over and over and over again. And then same thing with NSAIDs. The bigger risk long term is not to take it once or twice to reduce a fever, but it's if you're taking it on a pretty semi-regular basis to block that inflammation, then what you get as an outcome of those potential risks that we talked about tonight. So should you reduce a fever? I think you have to take it on a case-by-case basis. And so there's no one way that's right for everyone. Again, so some people also, what we're learning about body temperature is that, the classic 98.6, which is what everybody's taught. It's what I was taught. If your body temperature's not 98.6, then somehow you're completely abnormal. Well, there's a range for humans. I mean, that range can go. I mean, some people ride under 98.6. They run at 97.6, and some people ride in that kind of 99 zone. So some people are hotter, some people are cooler, and some people are right in the middle. And so, for these people that run a lower, like me, I run generally around a 97.8, 98 degree temperature on average, and my thyroid works just fine. For me, 104 fever is really 105 fever. So if you're basing it on when to make the call to lower the fever, you also have to keep in mind kind of what your normal base is and base it from there. So anyway, I think I belabored that. We talked about it a little bit last time too, so I wanted to cover that again tonight and just cover why, because a lot of you chimed in on that last video about we shouldn't be taking ibuprofen right now. So I wanted you to understand the mechanism, and I wanted you to understand that the World Health Organization actually doesn't recommend not taking ibuprofen. I think they reversed their position once the research actually came out, and there was no really valid research that they could base that claim on. So they kind of reversed their position from the original. Hey, don't forget to check out the rest of the series right here. Make sure you hit subscribe below. And as always, thanks for tuning in.